now, Work Matters with Julie Mann.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to that show that ponders the big question, does work matter? And if it does, why? On this show, we explore all kinds of topics that really kind of focus on the importance of creating work that matter. As we know, we all spend a lot of time doing this thing we call work, and so making it matter is very important, and there's all kind of ways that can happen. So those are the things we explore. And on this show today, we're going to explore the topic of, I'm going to call it talent attraction, but my distinguished guest will help you understand that it's a little bit more than that. So we're going to talk about talent attraction, but we're going to talk about it in lots of different ways. So joining me today is Joe O'Connor. And Joe is the CEO of a company called Vizi. And what's interesting about Vizi, when he thinks about talent acquisition and they think about how they interact with companies, it's really something that I think all companies are thinking about is how do we visually market our story? And how do we use that to attract people to want to work for our company? So that's kind of where we're going to go today. And if you're a listener, don't think about, I'm not a business thinking about attracting, but think about as you kind of listen through this segment, the other side of it is looking for a job and what other companies are doing to kind of help get that message out. So, okay, that was a long intro. Joe, I'm sorry about that, but welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Julie. Good to be here.
Oh, it's just great. So we did a segment earlier with Joe, and we kind of talked about that talent struggle, and we kind of talked about where we're at with talent and attraction and how those things are going. And so I think it's really interesting to explore as we're together again is, what are some of the changes that we're seeing on, like the candidate attraction into your company, and how do we kind of change up some of our old ways, if you want to say it, of doing HR? We talked about that on the last one. We kind of left it on that spot just to say we're in a time where as employers and as people looking for jobs, we're looking for a lot of different things. So what are you seeing, Joe?
Well, I think, Julie, as we have referenced before, that a lot of what is going on in talent attraction is really dominated by the fact that a lot of it is transactional by design. And I think if you think about this as attraction rather than talent acquisition, it means that you have, in a sense, like consumers, you have buyers and you have sellers. And the candidate today is very, very selective for a lot of reasons that we've discussed before. But I think that our practices and processes in attracting them really has to think more like the same way that companies attract customers, because it's a very competitive marketplace. And the interesting thing is, as we have referenced previously, there's a lot of dependency on an 80-year-old document known as the text-based job description.
Right.
And if you think about the mediums that we work in today and the amount of visual on social, et cetera, it just is sort of antithetical to what people are accustomed to and how they consume information and how they learn and basically how they get attracted to something. So it's interesting as well to note that all advertising is visual except job advertising. And It's been that way for some time.
That's actually an amazing insight. And so I'm going to kind of transition just to go over to the sidebar for just a second. So I am the very fortunate mother of 4 young men, aging from 18 to 26, and they are in that space, right? They are in that career exploration space. And so we spend a lot of time looking at things together. And it's really interesting to watch. And I had not put that together. Joe, I think that's just fantastic. But to watch them not get engaged when we go and look at different jobs, like you go onto a website and there is this job posting that is as boring could be, number one. And I say that, and I write them, so I'm not calling anybody out here, right? But then they're not, and it might be that visual difference because again, I'll use my kids. They read this thing, and then they look at me, and they're like, well, what does that mean? And, I could flip the HR speak and try to make it sound real, but there's a lot of experiences and a lot of time around the kitchen island where we're looking at stuff, and they're like, what does that mean? But I think it's like you said, it's a different method of connecting the dots for people, and they're the ones that are number one, we want to hire. By the way, I have 4 kids for hire if anybody's looking. And I'm just kidding. So you've got that, but you've got to kind of do things differently because they spend about 2 seconds reading that boring job posting, and they're like, I don't know if that one's for me. So you guys are doing it a little different, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think just to think about it more in the broader marketplace, the notion of employer branding and recruitment marketing, which has really been evolving over the last few years, is really the result of, I think, a lot of talent attraction leaders realizing that they need to stand out in what is very much a sea of sameness. So when we think about the power of visual, it isn't like it's a new invention. We're simply trying to leverage what has worked in traditional advertising for 100 years. Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt that our brains simply like pictures and visual much better than we necessarily like words. And we had things that we had to think about long before we had an alphabet. So the brain really feeds on visuals much differently than it does on words, and that's been proved over and over again if you just take a look at traditional advertising over any number of years. So these discussions around employer branding and recruitment marketing are very important because what people are really saying is, how do I stand out in this very competitive environment? And that would mean more awareness, just as you have with traditional advertising, and ultimately engagement. And it's really passive advertising to passive candidates when you're leveraging visual, so that at some point they're aware of you, at another point they're engaged a little more deeply, and then when they're ready to make a change, they'll probably remember you, raise their hand, and reach out to your particular brand, which they've experienced previously.
Sure. So you talk about, one of the things I found really fascinating when learning about your organization is you talk about an enhanced job description. And so, we know, again, whether we're a business or we're a listener that's looking for a job, we know what a job description, quote unquote, looks like because you've been trying to get a job or you've gotten a job and they've given you a job description. So somewhere along the way, you've probably seen one of those. But help the listeners understand in words, because we don't have pictures, right, what an enhanced job description might look like.
Right.
Paint that picture, if you would.
Yeah, we basically, again, we really think it's more of a transformation because you can do certain things to enhance the job, but I think the critical point is, and I think the great wow factor is that there is a transformation from the text-based job description, which, by the way, may not even have been changed in years, because one of the things we discovered is that people often feel talent attraction leaders that their job descriptions aren't up to par because they may have been touched for 10 years by 35 different recruiters over a period of time.
Right.
But the problem is people seldom do anything about it because we all know it's an extraordinarily onerous task to blow up all your job descriptions and start from scratch.
Right.
So there's two things. We do a primary transformation and use a lot of visual from website or from social media to basically create images that are consistent with what the job is about and also what the company is about. And again, our brains love that. So we're leveraging what has worked in traditional advertising. The other thing is it's highly automated, so we don't change with the current work processes of recruiters. And then finally, we design this so that you can make changes in real time without a lot of effort. And therefore, if there's something going on in the marketplace that's challenging, like let's say a pandemic, you have the ability to respond to that and change things in real time. Or maybe you've won an award in your company that you want to highlight. Or maybe you just want to standardize certain things. So I think fundamental to all of this, first and foremost, is to leverage what has worked historically with traditional advertising and have a much heavier use of visuals, whether it be video or regular photos. Secondly, it has to be easy to use. And thirdly, you have to have the ability to modify things in real time. So not
I'm
like a static landing page or microsite.
Right. So I'm going to kind of reframe the question a little bit. So I'm listening. I'm listening on the show, and I'm like, okay, so what does that look like? So I go to company ABC's website and I see that they have a opening for I don't know, I'll pick a dental hygienist just because I have to go to the dentist later on this week. And so what would that look like? Like if I clicked on that opening, or pick one that, is easy for you to describe, but I click on that opening, what would I see as someone looking for a job different than what I'm kind of like used to seeing, if you want to say?
Sure. First of all, let me just back up a little bit. One of the things that we heard from a lot of talent attraction leaders is that they rarely, if ever, get any support from marketing. So in most companies, understandably, there's a huge effort by marketing and or advertising to really dress up the primary website. And it is often incredibly visual with great photos, maybe even with video, and It's basically telling the story because it's being designed to attract consumers.
Right.
When you move to the career site, it's like dropping off into Craigslist. So you may be on the website, and it's really engaging and exciting. You get to the career site, and you have a list of URLs.
Right.
So that dental hygienist or whatever you were saying, it's just a list of URLs, and then you click into even more words, which is the text-based job descriptions.
And that's not fun?
So it's Craigslist, and then it's 1,000 words that look like a legal document.
Right.
And so that's a point in the candidate journey that is very critical because a lot of traffic goes to the career site, and it should be very engaging, just as their typical website is. So what you're going to see is something that is branding, that is telling the story, and furthermore, every one of those jobs will stop being a URL and begin to depict with a hero image something that is relevant to that particular job, and it could very well be an existing employee, or it could be, based, for example, when we have truck driver jobs open, you'll see truck drivers with the trucks they're going to be driving.
Right.
So it's relevant. The image is relevant at the job level. And the other reason that's important, that these are easily shared on social media. And you'll see an increase in employee likelihood to share because they're proud of where they work, and this is much more appealing and attractive.
Right.
So you have all that distribution with a hero image through Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn even, and that multiplies the distribution, the brand awareness, and the ultimate engagement. Passive advertising to both active and passive candidates over a period of time. And all I'm really suggesting is this is basically bringing the notion of the power of visual to recruitment.
Yeah.
And it's been successful generally with companies for lots and lots of years, and why wouldn't it be successful in attracting candidates? And it is.
Well, and it's interesting when you kind of frame it that way, Joe, because I was thinking about, if you think about any social media site that you use as just a person, right? Just a person in the world. So whether it's Facebook or Instagram or any of those spaces, you share the things that kind of catches your eye, right? You're not going to share something that's boring or whatever, right? Because it's just not something that, I liked you said, that they're proud to share it. But I think there's that, if you find it interesting, and that's what, I always kind of use that. If I find it interesting, I think somebody else might too. If I don't find it interesting, I'm not going to share it. I'm just talking about, information, and in that job space is just one of those, pieces of information that it's important to create that wow factor. Because going back to that talent conversation, right? There is a competitive market out there. It is, the supply and demand curve has shifted. And so how do you create that wow factor and kind of hook people right from the beginning to say, wow, this looks like a really cool company and I'd like to work there. Or this isn't the kind of job maybe I want, but wow, I want to share it with my brother, my sister, someone in my family, a friend who I know is looking. So I think that's what, I think is kind of really interesting when you think about how do you market, let's say that job opening. And I would tend to think that, are you seeing when they use that they're seeing a lot better, companies are seeing a lot better results and engagement, which at the end of the day, that's all part of it, right?
Exactly. And people forget that when Facebook first started, it wasn't necessarily visual. People were posting messages, and then they began to promote that they have 140% lift typically when you post with a picture. Mm-hmm. And now, of course, it's all visual.
Right.
Nobody would consider anything else. The challenge with recruitment is the recruiter has to say, how do I get the right photo? Will it fit? Do I have to Photoshop? Do I need approval from marketing? And so if, the visual is powerful, and if it's made easy to use, a lot of TA leaders have told us, and we've heard them say that they believe they don't use social media and leverage it as effectively as they can because it's just too complicated and too hard for the recruiter. So the extent to which you can point, click, and share, and also don't forget about text and email. That's another whole channel where you get very good results with visual. And, I think one other point that is often lost, a serious candidate, even on Indeed, is likely to go to the career site and check out the company.
Yes.
Not just apply on Indeed. Serious candidates are going to do a much more substantive review.
Yep.
And the extent to which they can learn more about the company. And by the way, the serious candidate is a candidate you want to attract for obvious reasons.
Right. Well, again, Joe, I can't thank you enough for joining us on the show, because I think what's important for, job seekers and employers to hear is that, the old ways, if you want to call it, we need to kind of work on those, create it to be more engaging. And at the end of the day, that outreach and that strategy, and however you do it on the business side, big business or small business, is really important to getting that talent in the door. So anyway, thanks again, Joe, for joining us. I really do appreciate it. And to our listeners, let's transform today. Let's have an impact on tomorrow. And as always, let's make work matter.